te dejas curar. Limpia tu mente, sana el dolor. Deja que fluya ternura y amor. Mira hacia arriba y está la cura. Sigue el camino con fe y bravura. Tu destino es lo celestial, lo eterno, lo puro, lo inmortal. Yahweh es grande, Yahweh es fiel. Oh, rompe cadenas con su poder. Un solo rúa, un solo cuerpo, no hay vuelta atrás. Se acaba el tiempo, no desistas, hermano, ten el valor. Él es soberano y nos da el favor. Oh. El esplendor de Yahweh, vestido en majestad, la tierra alegre está, la tierra alegre está, cubierto está de luz, venció la oscuridad. Tiembla su voz, tiembla su voz. Qué grande es Yahweh, cántale qué grande es Yahweh, y todos lo verán. Qué grande es Yahweh.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's doing great. And as always, it's a blessing to be with all of you guys. Good to see you in the chat, Christian, Cecilia, Yahoo, Brother Omar. Yeah, would bless you, my brother. I heard one of the audios you sent, I think, to the group or something. It was wonderful to hear you, as always. So motivating. It's crazy. Blessings to Paige. I will bless you, sister. Great to see you in the chat. And it was great to see you um, uh, this few days past. God will bless you. I hope you're doing great. Blessings to David and Hannah. I hope you guys are doing great. Blessings to Veronica and Damian. Yeah, will bless you guys. Annabelle, yeah, will bless you, sister. Karen, bless you. So good to see you as well. And today we're gonna continue with Isaiah chapter 20. If I'm not mistaken, that's the one we have to read today. So let's look for it. And then we'll pray in just a second. Just a second, I'll be right back. Not finding something. All right, let me see if this works. Okay, I'll be right back in just a second. All right, so let's pray so that we can start. Father Almighty Yahweh, we thank you so much for allowing us to be here once again and to be connected with each other through the internet in order to congregate, even if it's virtually, in order to study scriptures and get to know you and ourselves better. Father, we ask you that you help us in the way, lead us by the hand, and help us to always fulfill your perfect will, to fulfill your commandments according to what is written, according to the true spirit, the spirit of truth. Father, please give us more of the Ruach HaKodesh. Give us more wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and help us comprehend what we will read today. Help me to explain it in the best way possible for everybody to understand it and receive the message that you have for us tonight, as well for those who will listen to this teaching in the future. Please cover us with your Ruach and give us more and more of that oil to light the lamp within us in order to be a light to those around us. We thank you, Father, for our health and the health of our loved ones. Please help those who are going through any trial, any affliction, any tribulation of any kind. Please provide everyone's needs. Please bless everyone with health, joy, righteousness, and salvation in the name of our Savior and Sovereign Yahushua HaMashiach. Amen and Amen. Just a second. All right. So here we have Isaiah chapter 20th. And let me just find the Hebrew to start. Okay, this is a very short one. And I'm wondering if we already read this one, perhaps, since it was so short, maybe we read the previous one and this one. I don't know if Omar can confirm. And let me also. All right. We didn't? Okay, thank you, brother. So here we have the Hebrew as well. All right. So let's begin with the prophet Yeshayahu, chapter 20, verse 1. In the year that Tartan came to Ashdod, when Sargon, the sovereign of Ashur, sent him, and he fought against Ashdod and took it. At that same time, Yahweh spoke by means of Yeshayahu, son of Amoz, saying, Go and remove the sackcloth from your body. Oh, this is so amazing. Because I had a dream and I was about to pray about it, but it was a personal dream, so I decided not to pray about it here and to do it later. Um, and I was well, I prayed earlier also, but I, I was praying for Yahweh to give me something in the teaching that would connect with the dream I had, and this is amazing. Anyways, that was crazy. So I will read again and go to the concordance for a second. Isaiah 20th, and to see the names. Tartan, Ashdod, which is a very interesting name for several reasons that we will see in a moment. So, Tartan, field marshal, general, or commander. Field marshal, general, or commander. So it was a title. Then we have Ashdod, which means powerful. However, well, you see Shaddad, as in Shaddai, will has a connection with might. And here, Ashdod, as we see the word, we can separate it in two, and this would be fire, Esh, and then this would be David or David, King David, as in the fire of David. Or since David means beloved, it could be also seen as the fire of the beloved. So remember that Yahushua came as the water of life. He his name means he who is heard by the Most High or Elohim, but also could be interpreted as him whose name is mighty. So Shemuel represents the Messiah, Yahushua, while David represents the second manifestation because he first came as a priest according to the order of Melchizedek, and then he would come as a king. And in the book of Yirmiyahu, we see many times how Yahweh speaks of the last as himself being David. And then also how Yahushua, when he was talking to the Pharisees, he asked them, whose son is Messiah? And they said David. And he said, how can he be David's son if David himself calls him sovereign, as we see in Psalm 110? So, um, give me a second. So, so I was saying, Yahushua came as the priest. The last one comes as the king. So here, Ashdod connects with that, the fire of David coming in the end times, right? And we already saw that Tartan was before that, and he means field marshal, general, or commander. Remember that Yahweh sends the last as the leader of his heavenly army, for he is Mikael, who will also lead the army when fighting the dragon in Revelation 12, when the dragon and his third of the angels are expelled from heaven. Just a second, I'm sorry. Just in case that was making too much noise for some of you guys. Thank you. All right, so you get that? My bad. Thank you. All right, now we're better. Okay, so let's continue. Um, so Tartan, field marshal, general, or commander, as in one of the titles that the last would or could have. Then Ashdod as the fire of David, the fire of the beloved, or powerful, the powerful commander, the powerful general. Then Sargon, which is prince of the sun. Remember that obviously in the negative, the world has worshipped the sun, which is Halel, Lucifer, through all pagan beliefs, mainly. Well, most of them. Um, but also when it comes to symbolism, as we read in Malachi, for instance, Malachi 4, the we know that Messiah came and he said, I am the light of the world. And then the last becomes the lamp through which that light goes through. So he's pretty much the son of righteousness mentioned in Malachi 4 2. So here we see the prince of the sun, Sargon, which could have also a positive interpretation when we connect it to the previous names and what they could represent. So Ashur means a step, a step. And is interesting. Well, a step as in very close, like right there, just one step, and we get there. But also how when he receives a word, he is told to take his sandals off, which is what we use to walk around, right? So if we read these names through their meanings without the rest of the words connecting them, just the meanings of the names, we would have that the uh, chief commander who is powerful as the fire of David, the fire of the beloved one, is the prince of the son of righteousness, who is just one step away. So in the year that turned, and he fought against Ashdod and took it. At the same time, Yahweh spoke by means of Yeshayahu, son of Amoz. Yeshayahu, him whom Yahweh saves. So he would be that who is the fire of David, who would come but who would die and resurrect, as we see in Revelation 11, and needs the salvation that comes from Yahweh through Yahushua, son of Amoz. So at the same time, Yahweh spoke by means of Yeshayahu, son of Amoz, saying, "Go and remove the sackcloth from your body." Remember that for instance, the two witnesses is written that they wear sackcloth, and that is something that they would do back in the day to represent um, mourning, when they would be mourning for the um, dead, obviously, but for all the prophecies of punishment that would come against the people. So it would be a sign of the pain that was coming. So that is mainly what Revelation 11 tells us regarding the two witnesses, because we also read in Zechariah that the prophets in the end times would not dress as prophets. So what Revelation 11 reveals regarding the sackcloth um, is it has to do with a spiritual interpretation of that word and what that would mean back in the day, as in the time of Isaiah when he would wear it in the literal sense. Because remember that everything that happened from Adam to John the Baptist was literal in the flesh. And then when Messiah came, everything started again, for he is the second Adam. So everything began again, but in the spiritual sense. So now we need to interpret everything that was a figure of, or a shadow of things to come, all that was written in the Old Covenant. So at that same time, Yahweh spoke by means of Yeshayahu, son of Amoz, saying, "Go and remove the sackcloth from your body, and take your sandals off your feet." And he did so, walking naked and barefoot. So this is one that I always got to stop and make everybody think about this a little bit, because I think most people, when they read this, either they don't really pay attention or they don't really put themselves in his place, because he didn't have sandals in that case. But to think about how a prophet of the Most High would start to go around walking naked, and what that would represent, what we're about to see. But the fact that he had to do that, to walk around naked, to show what the Almighty was going to do to the people. So it needed to be done as a prophetical sign that would manifest the actual prophecy on earth. So it was something that needed to be done, but it was something that wasn't going to be understood, even if the prophet would explain what it was or what it meant. And also to think that the true prophet, whom everybody would see as crazy, the true prophet of Yahweh was the one doing this type of stuff, right? Walking around naked. So it is also understandable to think that when it comes to the way society works, they would see that as him having lost his mind. So this is something that people need to keep in mind, because when the prophets like Yeshayahu in this case do those things, in that time they are seen as crazy, hated, um, even killed, and then 100 years later they realize it was true what they said, and they understand every sign and why they did everything they did. So they took the book and they put it into the scriptures. But at the time, they didn't believe in them as they would then eventually claim to believe in them, because they still don't believe in the prophets, as Mashiach also told them. So this, as many other things that prophets had to do, I find amazing, and a bit funny and a bit sad, a little bit of everything. Just a second. So at that same time, Yahweh spoke by means of Yeshayahu. At that same time, Yahweh spoke by means of Yeshayahu, son of Amoz, saying, "Go and remove the sackcloth from your body, and take your sandals off your feet." And he did so, walking naked and barefoot. And Yahweh said, as my servant Yeshayahu has walked naked and barefoot 3 years for a sign and a wonder against Mizraim and Cush. Now, this also I find very interesting because remember that we are, let me see if we have the screen this time. Our calendar. Today, it will be 10th of Elul, right? The 10th of Elul, exactly 1 month from Yom Kippur, from the day when the two witnesses would die. We are in the 30 days of purification. And this is the 6th month. So if the 3.5 years began, let's say, I'm not saying it's a fact, I'm just saying it could be. If they began on this um Aviv, of first month of the year in the Hebrew calendar, which was in this case it would have been during Pesach, during Matzot, so at the beginning of April. Then on the 7th month, which is the month that is coming in the Hebrew calendar, that would start the fall. It would start the time in which the second seal could be open if the first seal was open on the first month. Okay, so I hope you're following me. If the first seal was open on the first month, then the second seal could be open starting from the next month. And we are on the 10th of the 6th month. And this is interesting because if we are already on the 10th of the 6th month, which would be 6 months from obviously the 10th of Aviv, which is the time when Yahweh said to bring the lamb for Pesach, and it is the time when Yahushua entered on a donkey into Jerusalem. It's interesting because then that would mean that we have 3 years to go for the two witnesses to be killed, right? Because 6 months would have passed almost already, like by a few days. And I say that just because it's interesting how Yahweh is telling him to take off his sackcloth, which doesn't exactly say how long he would have wore that for, but it could be like the 6 first months of the two witnesses, and then he walks naked for 3 years. So the last 3 years of the two witnesses, for instance, in which they are killed. So remember that the two witnesses will be hated and will be seen as blasphemous, as crazy, and a bunch of other things. Just like people would look at a person who likes to walk around naked all the time, right? There are neighborhoods where there are people who are a little bit crazy, and they might do stuff like that, and everybody in the neighborhood would know them forever as the crazy one. So he did it for 3 years. It says, and Yahweh said, as my servant Yeshayahu has walked. So he first walked for 3 years, and then the message was given. He first walked naked for 3 years, and then Yahweh said, okay, guys, remember how he walked naked? That meant this. So imagine how, I don't know how to call it, but interesting for Yeshayahu to have to go through this. And Yahweh said, as my servant Yeshayahu has walked naked and barefoot 3 years for a sign and a wonder against Mizraim and Cush. Against Mizraim and Cush. Remember that they both came from Cam, the one of the three sons of Noach. Mizraim, Egypt. Remember that the two witnesses are killed in the spiritual Egypt. And obviously, it was in Egypt that we were enslaved before the first Exodus. Cush normally is interpreted as uh, Ethiopia, but it was larger at that time. It was more land. Mizraim means the land of two borders, which would represent this world, this reality, for it has a beginning and an end, which is the limit of time. And then Kush means black. So, in this sense, since it's referring to punishment, it would refer to darkness in the spiritual sense. So, and Yahweh said, as my servant Yeshayahu has walked naked and barefoot 3 years for a sign and a wonder against Mizraim and Cush, so does the sovereign of Ashur lead away the captives of Mizraim and the exiles of Cush. So does the sovereign of Ashur lead away the captives of Mizraim and the exiles of Cush. Young and old, naked and barefoot, with their buttocks uncovered, the shame of Mizraim. The shame of Mizraim. So, if the two witnesses are killed in the place that spiritually is Mizraim, and we know that they are killed in Jerusalem, that means that nowadays Jerusalem and the supposed Jewish people are actually spiritual Egyptians. And they will go through shame because of what they have done and claim according, well, to history. So, young and old, naked and barefoot, with their buttocks uncovered, the shame of Mizraim. And they shall be afraid and ashamed of Cush, their expectation, and of Mizraim, their boast. Remember that Nimrod came from Cush. And, okay, so let me connect the whole thing because I didn't mention this earlier. Okay. Ashur, right? When it talks about Ashur, remember that I always mention how it represents the world government, the new world order they're trying to establish. And when Egypt is mentioned close to Ashur, as here, Mizraim, it represents the religious system. So Ashur would represent the first beast, the first beast, and Egypt the second beast. So the false prophet, right? So Sennacherib was the king of Ashur, which represents the beast. The same representation is that of Nimrod. Nimrod is the first representation of the first beast of Revelation 13. And Nimrod was a son of Cush. So it's interesting that Yahweh speaks here against them and he mentions these specific places as in referring to what the beast and second beast will do, what the world leader and the false prophet will do, like Mizraim being the false prophet and Cush being the world leader. So, and they shall be afraid and ashamed of Cush, their expectation. They were expecting the world leader to solve all their problems, to solve the economy, to solve war, to solve this and that. Those were their expectations, but they will be ashamed or having worshipped the beast. And they shall be afraid and ashamed of Cush, their expectation. They will eventually be afraid of him as well, him and the government that he will establish. And of Mizraim, their boast. They boast regarding their belief, their religion, thinking it is the true one, and then they will realize they were worshiping the mighty one of this world, which made sense, for they were of the world. And the inhabitant of this coastland shall say in that day, and the inhabitant of this coastland shall say in that day, see, such is our expectation. Wherever we flee for help to be delivered from the sovereign of Ashur, and how do we escape? So I'll repeat, and the inhabitant of this coastland shall say in that day, see, such is our expectation, wherever we flee for help to be delivered from the sovereign of Ashur, and how do we escape? Whoever the world seeks salvation from, that is not from the true Savior, Yahushua HaMashiach, they will eventually be ashamed of it because they will realize they have no place to go. All roads go to Rome, lead to the same place. So that's why they will say, and how do we escape? We want to be delivered from Ashur, from the beast, from the world leader. And everywhere we go, we end up in the same situation. So that's how the chapter ends. Let me see if there are questions. Marco asks, what word should we use instead of Lord? I use sovereign or Adon, which is the Hebrew. Adon for Hebrew and sovereign for English. Thank you, Omar. All right. So let's read another one since that was very short. Okay. Verse 21. And it says, the message concerning the wilderness of the sea. As whirlwinds in the south sweep on, so it comes from the wilderness, from an awesome land. This is wonderful. So, the wilderness references where the untamed animals are pretty much. So it represents the nations. And as you know, that's where pretty much the lion would be king. So by saying the wilderness of the sea confirms that, for the sea represents the nations. So Yahushua first came as the lamb. The second time he comes as the lion, because the first time he came to the land of Israel. The second time he comes to the sea, meaning the nations, the wilderness of the sea. So the message concerning the wilderness of the sea, and let me see how it says here in Hebrew. It says Masa Midbar Yam. Midbar Yam. The wilderness or desert of the sea. But remember that Midbar can be seen as the source of the word. Midbar is the place where we get the word. The word for the sea, for the nations. The message concerning the wilderness of the sea. As whirlwinds in the south, which represents the right, the blessing, sweep on, so it comes from the wilderness, from an awesome land. A distressing vision is revealed to me. The treacherous betrays, and the ravager ravages. Go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media. All the groaning I bring to an end. Remember, this means it is connected to Olam, to the world, to a secret, Elam, also to might, media, to that which is in the middle. So it says, therefore my loins are filled with anguish. Pangs have seized me, like the pangs of a woman in labor. As you guys know, every time we read that, it references the end times for Yahushua, and the scriptures and many other places say that the end times would be like the pangs of a woman in labor. And in fact, we see it also in the actual book of Revelation in chapter 12. Therefore, my loins are filled with anguish. Now, also remember that in the previous chapter, we read how Yahweh told Yeshayahu, take off your sackcloth, which is mentioned in Revelation 11 in reference to the two witnesses. And then he told them to walk naked for 3 years, which could be connected to the last 3 years of the two witnesses. So now, interesting that when those 3 years pass, for Yahweh said, just as he walked for 3 years, so now he's having anguish, as in when the last has to die, will feel anguish. Just like when Mashiach had to go through death, he felt anguish. And remember that the chapter in Revelation 12 that I mentioned regarding the women that will be going through labor pains, that refers to the congregation, the chosen few, who will see the death of the witness like Moshe. So his resurrection will be his actual birth, as we have spoken in many other times. So interesting that we see the previous chapter as in the last 3 years of the two witnesses, and then here him as one of the two witnesses going through this anguish as in being prepared to die. So therefore my loins are filled with anguish. Pains have seized me like the pains of a woman in labor. I was distressed when I heard it. I was troubled when I saw it. My heart reeled, horror overwhelmed me. The night for which I longed, he he turned into fear for me. Again, I'll read it again and see how it pretty much confirms what I just mentioned, like the day, or in this case, night, in which he would die. My heart reeled, horror overwhelmed me. The night for which I longed, he turned into fear for me. Now, obviously, it would be like saying the day I was waiting for, this is the day I was waiting for my whole life, and then he turned it into the worst day of my life, right? And in a way, that's how it would be with the last, because he just wants to go to the next world, to the next reality, to finish his ministry, and that will come with his death, and that will be the worst for his flesh. So it will be fear for him, that day which he longed for. Interestingly enough, we read in the previous study how Yirmiyahu was asking Yahweh to give him death, right? Just like Eliyahu did, just like Job, in a way, thought as well regarding cursing his day of birth, hoping to have been aborted. So we see also how this connects with that same thing regarding the prophecy of the last. So my heart reeled, horror overwhelmed me. The night for which I longed, he turned into fear for me. Prepare the table, spread the mat, eat and drink. Arise, you princes, anoint the shield, as in get ready to go and fight. Now, interesting also that one needs to anoint the shield. It's pretty much to put oil so that the sword or whatever hits it will slide easier. So it's an extra protection for the shield. And remember that in our shield, which is faith, according to the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, we also need to anoint our shield, which would be with the Ruach HaKodesh. So faith, with that spirit of Mashiach, the spirit of truth, will help with protecting us from the enemy. So I'll read it again. Prepare the table, spread the mat, eat and drink. Arise, you princes, anoint the shield. For Yahweh has said this to me. Go, set a watchman, let him declare what he sees. So that would be like the first, the prophet like Moshe said in the prophet Eliyahu. And he saw a chariot with a pair of horsemen. Now, interesting as well that Yeshayahu could have seen it because he was a prophet and he would see visions, but in this case, he told somebody else and that someone saw it. So remember that Isaiah himself prophesies about the last being blind in the spiritual sense. So this is interesting as well. Yahweh has said this to me: Go set a watchman, let him declare what he sees. And he saw a chariot with a pair of horsemen, a chariot of donkeys, and a chariot of camels. And he listened attentively, very attentively. Then he cried, A lion, O Yahweh! I stand continually on the watchtower in the daytime, and I have sat at my post every night. And see this, a chariot of men coming with a pair of horsemen. And he spoke up and said, Babel is fallen, and all the carved images of her mighty ones he has broken to the ground. It continues and it gets even better, so I'll just go back a little bit and explain some of it. So it says, prepare the table, spread the mat. I find this interesting because, like I mentioned, this previous verse could be seen as a representation of the day or night, in this case, in which the two witnesses are killed. And remember that that would happen on Yom Kippur, which is a day which is normally taken to fast, to afflict one's soul. So either right after Yom Kippur, everybody will go and prepare the table to eat, which is normally what would happen, or it could be connected to the fact that they have a different calendar and the fact that um well, obviously they wouldn't be celebrating Yom Kippur and therefore fasting on the actual Yom Kippur, but on their Yom Kippur. And the fact that when it comes to the wicked ones, the ones that will kill the two witnesses, they will not afflict themselves for their death. So they will kill them and then go to eat, just like they did when they killed Mashiach. They killed Mashiach and then went to eat the lamb. They went to eat Pesach. So my heart reeled, horror overwhelmed me. The night for which I longed, he turned into fear for me. Prepare the table, spread the mat, eat and drink. Arise, you princes, anoint the shield. For Yahweh has said to the for Yahweh has said this to me. Go set a watchman, let him declare what he sees. And he saw a chariot with a pair of horsemen. So a chariot with a pair of horsemen. A chariot of donkeys and a chariot of camels. So it doesn't say if the other ones had just a pair, but it is possible since the first one did. So that would be six, right? Each chariot with a pair of horsemen. And remember that the just like here we see horsemen, then donkeys, then camels. In the end times, we see the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls of wrath. The seals, the first seals start with horsemen. Therefore, the trumpets could be connected, if that's the case, with the donkeys, and the bowls of wrath with the camels, which is interesting because camels can carry liquid, right? Water. And they represent vessels or, well, vehicles that carry riches, just like the great whore of Babylon, that is about to fall in this prophecy right here and falls in Revelation 18 and 19, well, 17 and 18, um, would be connected to those riches as camels and also to the last plagues, the bowls of wrath. So, and he saw a chariot with a pair of horsemen, also, well, not just thinking about how the first verse, the previous chapter that we just read, in a way could be connected to the second horseman, the one that is given a sword, right, for the second seal of Revelation, chapter 6. So a pair of horsemen, a chariot of donkeys, and a chariot of camels. And he listened attentively, very attentively. Then he cried, "A lion, O Yahweh." As always, right? The lion could be positive, which is the lion of Yahudah, Yahweh as the lion, just like Yahushua came as the lamb, as I just mentioned not long ago. And also, the scripture tells us that Satan goes around like a roaring lion looking for whom he may devour. And remember, I mentioned the lion when we started talking about the wilderness of the sea, the message concerning the wilderness of the sea. So he sees horsemen, donkeys, camels, and then a lion. So if this was two and two, is like the menorah that has seven lights, and the lion would be the seventh that brings completion. And two horsemen, two donkeys, two camels, just like uh, two candles or lights in the menorah connect with each other. The first and the last, the second and the sixth, the third and the fifth, and then the fourth right in the middle. So then he cried, "A lion, O Yahweh." Let me see the word that he used for lion. Aryeh. Vayikra Aryeh. And he doesn't say Yahweh, it says Adonai. Vayikra Aryeh. But look how Aryeh, which is lion, ends in Yah. In this case, pronounced as in Yahweh, when the hey is at the end. Yeah, right? Yahweh, in this case, Aryeh. But as you can see, the last two letters of Aryeh, of lion, are the first two letters of Yahweh. So Aryeh connects the second part with the name of the Most High. So it will represent how Yahweh comes in the end as a lion. And the other two letters are the Aleph, which is connected to Yahushua as the first, but also the last as the ox, coming from Yosef, as the head and the hen of the spirit. So, going back. Then he cried, "A lion, O Adonai. I stand continually on the watchtower in the daytime, and I have sat at my post every night." Like many of us, waiting for the end times, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and not seeing anything, or sometimes seeing a lot, or sometimes thinking we saw everything, but having to wait more even after seeing. And then having spiritual revelations, and then for a long time having no revelation, which makes the enemy use that against us, right? So, like this watchman saying, "I stand continually on the watchtower in the daytime, and I have sat at my post every night. And see this," right now that it would manifest, "a chariot of men coming with a pair of horsemen." And he spoke up and said, "Babel is fallen, is fallen." So, a prophecy of the fall of Babylon, as we see in Revelation, which happens after the death of the two witnesses. So interesting that it says here that a pair of horsemen announced the fall of Babel. "And see, there's a chariot of men coming with a pair of horsemen. And he spoke up and said, Babel is fallen, and all the carved images of the idols of her mighty ones he has broken to the ground. Oh, my threshing and the grain of my floor." That which I have heard from Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, I have declared to you. So you see how it mentions the threshing and the grain, because that is going to happen at the same time as the harvest. Remember that the two witnesses are killed. They resurrect 3.5 days later. A day and a half later, the chosen few have to flee to the mountains because the abomination of desolation will be in the place where it should not be, will manifest on this earth and claim to be the Christ, and the people in the world will accept him. So he will send his armies to put a mark on everybody. So the chosen will have to flee to the mountains, and in 7 days they will be harvested on the 8th during the seventh trumpet. So, how interesting that we see in the previous chapter Yirmiyahu referencing having wore sackcloth, like the two witnesses, then taking it off for 3 years, as representing the 3.5 years, and then coming to this chapter where he says that the day that he longed for became a fear for him, prepared the table connected to the feast and Yom Kippur, as I mentioned, and what comes afterwards, and the fact that they have a different calendar. Then the fact that he sets a watchman, as in Eliyahu, the other witness, and he sees these animals, which I already mentioned everything, plus, well, some more that could be mentioned. Um, but I already mentioned like the animals has the seven lights of the menorah, therefore as the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls of wrath, everything that has to happen in the last 7 years. The fact that in the previous chapter it kind of connected with the manifestation of the second horseman, so a pair of horsemen is also interesting in this verse 7. And then he saw a lion, just like Yahweh would manifest on this end times as a lion, unlike the first manifestation in which he manifested as a lamb. And then after they killed him, Babel will fall. When they kill the two witnesses and they resurrect and the harvest happens, Babel will fall. So interestingly enough, right after mentioning Babel is falling, he says, "Oh, my threshing and the grain of my floor. That which I have heard from Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, I have declared to you." The message concerning Duma. The message concerning Duma. Let me see Duma. Silence. So Duma appears here as silence. All right. So the message concerning silence. He calls to me out of Sheir. That's interesting. As we will see eventually in Isaiah 63, Yahweh manifests in the end times from Edom. So he manifests dressed in red. That represents many things. One of them, that he will be seen as a Gentile, that he will be seen as sinful. In fact, he comes as a prodigal son. So the message concerning Duma, he calls to me out of Sheir. Remember that Sheir was a land that was inhabited by Asaph, by Edom, the brother of Jacob. Sheir means hairy, hairy one. And they will reference the hairy ones to a type of goat of those mountains, but in a spiritual sense to demons. So the message concerning silence, he calls to me out of the hairiness. So the message concerning Duma, he calls to me out of Sheir, as in from Edom, from the Gentiles. Watchmen, how much of the night is past? Oh, that's amazing, because we've been talking a lot about it and about the possibility of this year being the beginning of. And remember that the last comes as a thief in the night. The world, the society will be in darkness when Yahweh manifests again. So just a few will realize it. Even after death, after his death and resurrection, a few will realize it, according to what we see in the book of Revelation. They will continue to worship their demons, their idols, until Babel falls, and they will be in shame. But that is during the last 3.5 years. So here Yahweh is asking, how much of the night is past? Watchman, how much of the night has passed? Right? Asking the times. And remember that in Christianity, they normally say, you shouldn't worry about that. You shouldn't read about that. You shouldn't talk about that. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And they don't understand what that verse means. No one knows the day or the hour, right? And I have explained that many times. The other day, I heard Omar explaining it too beautifully. So you guys know already what that actually means and how it should be interpreted. And if any of you who are listening doesn't know, let me know and I will explain it again. But the point is, that Yahweh is asking the watchmen. We should all be watchmen. We should all be watching, like the five um, prudent virgins, right? The wise virgins that were watching. So we need to be watchmen. And that means also have conscience regarding time. Know to know what time it is, to also be able to give a good report when asked about it. So Yahweh is asking the watchman, and we should be watchmen, how much of the night has passed. It's like saying, how much of the end times have passed. The watchman said, morning came, and also the night. If you inquire, inquire. Come again. Right? Like, come again. Everything I mean, morning came, night came, all good. You can come again if you want to ask again. Which is also how we should be with the Father. Ask, ask, ask. In fact, Yahweh is good. Well, you know that already, but I have a an app that to give me a verse every day, and I don't read it all every day, to be honest. But because I want it to be in a time when Yahweh wants me to read it, so I don't read it all the time. But uh, this day I did read it for some reason. When I grabbed it was there, so I was like, okay, let's read it. And it was exactly that, like, ask and you shall receive, knock and you shall be open. So Yahushua said that, right? And that's pretty much what the watchman is saying. Because yeah, in this case, like I said, we should be like that. We should ask Yahweh, when are you coming? When is everything happening? When in time are we? Have we started yet? Have we not? That those are questions that we should make ourselves. Is not to go crazy about it. We should all leave it to the Father, but He wants to see interest, right? Because it says in the scriptures, um, come, right? So people who are not expecting His coming will not see His coming, and that is key. So the watchman said, morning came and also the night. If you inquire, inquire, come again. The message concerning Arabia, the um, the plain in the forest in Arabia, you stay. Oh, you traveling companies of Didanites. Now let me see this too. Arabia, Dedanim, steep dwellers to grow dark. Oh well, this is from Erev, as in evening, but there's another one. Steep dwellers. There was another one that also translates it as plain, which is similar here, but not exactly. Or let me see, maybe it's one of these. It says that it is from Arav. Yeah, all right, same one. And then this one, the Dani, low country. Steppe dwellers, low country. So, as in those who live on this earth, which is low next to heaven, and also low spiritually, those who are in the depths of society, or just this reality. I repeat, because in society you could be right at the top and be in spiritually at the depths, which is pretty much all the time what happens. So, the message concerning Arabia, in the forest of Arabia, you stay. Oh, you traveling companies of Didanites. You who dwell in the land of Tema of the south. Let me just make sure it is the Tema I'm thinking of. Tema, the desert. So you see, South Country, because it can be seen as from the right, and right is south, south, etc., etc. So because of this, yum. So, but let's use desert. So you who dwell in the land of the desert, which is also connecting with the Arabia, which is desert land or plain. Didanites low country, as in also where the desert is most of the time, right? Because they're low, and that's why the heat and other things. So for they fled. Oh, you who dwell in the land of Tema, bring water to him. So that shows that those who dwell in the desert, those who have no water, bring water to him who is thirsty. Meet the fugitive with bread. Something that they wouldn't do in Sodom and Gomorrah, for instance, and that's why they went through what they went, and they became a desert land, even though they were like a paradise. So you who dwell in this world, which is like a desert, knowing the reality in which you live, as in Tema, you should bring water to those in need. You should be able to preach of Mashiach to those who are thirsty. Meet the fugitive with bread. Yahushua is the bread of life. Those who are fleeing from the enemy, you should find them and give them the bread of life. For they fled from the swords, from the drawn sword, from the bent bow, and from the stress of battle. For thus Yahweh has said to me, within a year, according to the year of a hired man, all the steam of Kedar shall come to an end, and the rest of the number of archers, the mighty men of the people of Kedar, shall be few. For Yahweh Elohim of Israel has spoken. 1 year. Now let me find Kedar. Dark. To mourn or darkness. Hmm. And it says, for thus has said to me, within a year, according to the year of a hired man, all the steam of darkness, all the steam of the enemy shall come to an end. May it be so. And the rest of the number of archers, the mighty men of the people of Kedar, of darkness, shall be few. For Yahweh Elohim of Israel has spoken. So we should put it in the calendar. Let's hope in a year something happens. That's how the chapter ends. And let me see if there are questions or comments. That's right, Omar. Confusion is falling. It's beautiful. That's right, brother. All right, no questions here. I guess no questions on TikTok either. One? Oh no, no. Okay, so I don't know if you guys want to read another one or we close it here. You let me know. You're welcome, brother. One more, one more. Another one. Said page. All right. Sure. All right. So chapter 20 22 was it? Okay. The message concerning the valley of vision. In Hebrew, Masa Gay Chizayon. The valley of vision. Remember that some call the book of Revelation Chisayon, as in the vision. So the message concerning the valley of vision. What troubles you now that you have all gone up to the housetops? You who are filled with turmoils, a noisy city, a city of revelry. Remember that the housetops are not, were not like they are nowadays. Nowadays, you don't normally get on the housetop unless it is built for it, right? Back in the day, the houses were built so that people could go to the housetop um, to get fresh air and stuff, because most of the house would be under the land because of the heat and other things. So, reason why also when Mashiach speaks about the fleeing from Yahudah, it says to not go back into the house when you are at the housetop. So it would be like just go, but nowadays it would be like jump, and that would be an issue. So that was like the um outside part of the house where people would, I repeat, um also would be there to, in the bad sense, worship the stars. So the message concerning the valley of vision. What troubles you now that you have all gone up to the housetops? Remember that the false Messiah will manifest, and when he does, most likely the government will use Project Bluebeam to project his image on, well, all over the world, in the main cities of the world, so that people will believe that he is omnipresent, and they will most likely get, in this case, it's possible on the housetops to be able to see it closer. But I repeat, this is more for their times, something more common for their times than it is nowadays because of the way houses are built mostly on the west. So you who are filled with turmoils, a noisy city, a city of revelry, your slain are not slain with the sword, nor the dead in battle. All your rulers have fled together. Without a bow, they were taken captive. All who are found in you are bound together, who have fled from afar. Therefore I said, look away from me. Let me weep bitterly. Do not try to comfort me because of the ravaging of the daughter of my people. Remember that in the previous chapter, well, actually, the two chapters that we just read were pretty connected with the end times, with the book of Revelation. Just a second. All right. So, and thank you to those who said bless. So, in in the previous two chapters, we saw how Isaiah was wearing sackcloth, like representing the first 6 months of the two witnesses. Then he was told to take off his sackcloth, and he lasted 3 years being naked to show what would come to the world right after him. Then at the end of those 3 years, we got the chapter 20, the previous, 21, I guess. All right, that's the last one, uh, in which he was sad and afraid of the day that had come, as representing the day of the death of the two witnesses. And after that, then the seven bowls of wrath would happen, and therefore the last 3.5 years when Babel would fall. So we saw in the previous chapter that Babel fell. Now we read here, therefore I said, look away from me, let me weep bitterly. Do not try to comfort me because of the ravaging of the daughter of my people. Remember that when the chosen few are harvested, which the harvest was also mentioned in the previous chapter, when the chosen few are harvested as the wheat, which is the one that was mentioned in the previous chapter, then the grapes are harvested, but the grapes are thrown in the winepress of the wrath. So that's where the many will die. And the many are said to be descendants of the virgin that is harvested in Revelation 12. Just like here is saying, the daughter of my people. So not his people, but the daughter, the descendant of his people. So the many will die during the Great Tribulation, during 30-day period, as we see in Hosea 5:7, and then they will be resurrected and made righteous through the blood of Mashiach. All right. So it says, do not try to comfort me because of the ravaging of the daughter of my people. For it is a day of uproar and treading down and perplexity by the sovereign Yahweh of hosts in the valley of vision, breaking down of a wall and of crying to the mountain. And a lamb bore the quiver with chariots of men and horsemen, and Kir bare the shield. Let's see these two names. We already spoke about a lamb, but let's do it again. Kir would be city or city wall. A lamb, eternity. Remember I mentioned, well, it comes from a lamb, which is secret, to conceal. Eternity is secret, so that's why they translate it as eternity. But it has to do with the secrecy, with that which is hidden from us, as in eternity. But a lamb also is where we get olam, which is seen as world. The olam hazeh, this world, or the olam haba, the world to come. All right, so a lamb can be seen as the world of eternity, the world to come, that which is a secret as well. And kid, a wall side. So, with that in mind, you see how it says breaking down of a wall, as in kid. So, therefore, the other part would be connected to a lamb. And of crying to the mountain. The mountain represents the kingdom of Yahweh, as in that eternal kingdom, eternal world. And a lamb bore the quiver with chariots of men and horsemen, and Kid bare the shield. As in, a wall works as a shield for a city. Kid bare the shield, as in breaking down of a wall. A lamb bore the quiver. Remember that the last who brings eternity through the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach comes with a bow. and his 144,000 spiritual children are his arrows. So Elam bore the quiver with chariots of men and horsemen, as in the heavenly army, and Kir bare the shield. And it shall be that your choicest valleys shall be filled with chariots, and the horsemen shall take up positions at the gate. Then he removed the covering of Yahudah, and you looked in that day to the weapons of the house of the forest. This is talking about what the enemy did when they enter um, Jerusalem, and they saw, well, as we see here, then he removed the covering of Yahudah, and you looked in that day to the weapons of the house of the forest, and you saw the breaches of the city of David, that it was great, and you gathered together the waters of the lower pool, and you counted the houses of Jerusalem, and the houses you broke down to strengthen the wall, and you dug a ditch between the two walls for the water of the old pool. But you have not looked to its maker, nor have you seen him who fashioned it long ago. So the enemy entered and did everything that he wanted, because also in the historical sense, this connects with the previous chapter, because remember that after Babel came the Assyrian Empire, and they were the ones who also came to try and destroy Jerusalem and all of that with Sennacherib when Chizkiyahu was the king of Israel, to whom Yeshayahu went to say that he was going to die, and then he received 15 years more. Um, so all of that is happening right now is connected to that, but also prophetically to our time. So, and you saw the breaches of the city of David, that it was great, and you gathered together the waters of the lower pool, just like the enemy gathered together the water, or the doctrine, the teaching of the first manifestation, and he wanted to control it, and that's what he did through the apostasy. So, and you counted the houses of Jerusalem, and the houses you broke down to strengthen the wall of separation between us and the Most High in this case. And you dug a ditch between the two walls for the water of the old pool, but you have not looked to its maker, nor have you seen him who fashioned it long ago. So even those who claim to be doing it for the good of the people within Christianity, they didn't look at the maker. So everything they did it for the enemy or for themselves. And you dug a ditch between the two walls for the water of the pool, of the old pool, but you have not looked to its maker, nor have you seen him who fashioned it long ago. And in that day the sovereign Yahweh of hosts called the weeping and for mourning. I'm sorry, I read it wrong. And in that day the sovereign Yahweh of hosts called for weeping and for mourning, for boldness and for girding with sackcloth. Again, sackcloth and next to boldness as signs of mourning. For boldness and for girding with sackcloth. Then see joy and gladness, killing oxen and slaying sheep, eating meat and drinking wine. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Doesn't that sound familiar? Remember what is written when it comes to the coming of the Son of Man would be like the days of Noah. They were eating and drinking. That is the way this society thinks and acts. So while the two witnesses will be in sackcloth, spiritually speaking, because of their teaching, the world will be in joy and gladness. When they kill them, they will rejoice and give gifts to each other, as we see in Revelation 11. When they kill the two witnesses, they will rejoice. The whole world will rejoice, not knowing what is coming. And as it is written, when Noah entered the ark, then the water came and destroyed them all. So when the last enters heaven, then the fire will come and destroy them all. And that's why it says that when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction will come upon them. So when they kill the two witnesses, there will be joy They will be joyful and glad. They will say peace and safety, but then sudden destruction will come. So it says, then see joy and gladness, killing oxen, as in the witness, like Moshe, who is an ox. And if there are two, killing oxen and slaying sheep, as in Yahushua, the lamb. Eating meat and drinking wine, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. And it was revealed in my hearing by Yahweh of hosts, for this crookedness shall certainly not be pardoned until you die. This is interesting because this is pretty much uh, a message that also fits perfectly the many, showing how they have to die in order to pay for that sin that they didn't want to change, which was in this case confess the true name of the Most High and His Son for salvation. They don't want to. They want to continue confessing Baal, the Lord, as their sovereign, and therefore they will have to go through death in order to cleanse their tongues and other things, cleanse their souls, right? So that's why the many will have to go through death. That's why after the chosen few are harvested, it is said, happy are those who die from now on in Mashiach. So here we see that it says, for this crookedness shall certainly not be pardoned until you die, said the sovereign Yahweh of hosts. Now, also interesting how he says it. It was revealed in my hearing. He could have just said, he told me, right? I was told. But the way he said is interesting because faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of Yahweh. They believe in their hearts, but they don't confess the word of Yahweh with their mouths. So they get faith by hearing, but after that, they don't confess the word of Yahweh. So it was revealed in my hearing by Yahweh of hosts. For this crookedness shall certainly not be pardoned until you die. That's verse 14. It was revealed in my ear. Yahweh Sabaoth. You see, interestingly enough, just like the word, the chapter started with Chisayon, the valley of division, gay Chisayon. In this case, we have Nigla, Venigla, which comes from Gala, which is where we get also Hit Galut, which is the other name given to Revelation. So both verbs are used in this chapter, as in confirming that it refers to the end. So going back here, thus said the sovereign Yahweh of hosts, go, come to this steward, to Shebna, who is over the house, and say, what have you here, and whom have you here? Let me go and see the name first. 15. Shebna. Here we have it. Vigor. Vigor. Thus said Yahweh, thus said the sovereign Yahweh of hosts, go come to this steward, to Vigor, to Shebna, who is over the house, and say, what have you here, and whom have you here, that you have hewn a burial site here, as he who hews himself a burial site on high, inscribing a resting place for himself in a rock. Inscribing, let me see, engraving as well, the word that is used there. So, Shebna as Halel, Lucifer, who had a lot of vigor, a lot of potential when he was created and then given a light. But then he wanted to take the place of Mashiach when he said, I will go up and place my throne next to Elohim and I will be like Elohim. And that's when Mikael said, Mikael, who is like Elohim? So That's when his fall started, first with falling from the favor and then eventually from his place. So, thus said Yahweh, thus said the sovereign Yahweh of hosts, go come to the steward, to Shebna, who is over the house, who is over the house. So he is um, the one in charge of this reality, as they say in the world, the God of this world, right? He is the mighty one of this world, of this reality. He was in charge of human reality. Also, I was looking for another word. Hmm. Well, the word is steward, but there's a synonym that I was looking for that I'm not finding right now in my head. Major domo. What is butler? Okay, yeah. Major dome. Right, as in Spanish. Expect that word to appear like that. But so the one who is over the dome, in charge of the dome. So that was Halel, but he lost his authority, mainly when he influenced and ended up killing Mashiach, influenced the Pharisees to kill Mashiach. So go come to this steward, to Shebna, who is over the house, and say, what have you here? And whom have you here? The third of angels, for instance, that you have hewn a burial site here, as in with what he did in the heavens. He was trying to get a throne next to Yahweh in the heights. And what he ended up doing was getting a tomb, right? Getting a burial site. That you have hewn a burial site here, as he who hews himself a burial site on high, inscribing a resting place for himself in a rock. Remember that he is called a rock as Tzur when Yahweh speaks to Satan through Ezekiel 28, verse 17. See, Yahweh is hurling you away as when Satan falls to the earth. O man, and is firmly grasping you, rolling you up tightly like a ball into a wide land. How interesting that he, Satan, Lucifer, is called the architect of the universe. And it doesn't mean the actual universe in which we live, but the universe which he created for people to believe they are living in so that he can control them easier. So he is the architect of the universe because he created a ball in which everybody is living in their minds, right? So rolling you up tightly like a ball into a wide land. There you are to die, and there your steamed chariots are to be the shame of your sovereign's house. There you are to die. That's why when Satan falls from heaven, he will come to this earth to die like a man, as we read in Ezekiel 28. And there your steam chariots are to be the shame of your sovereign's house. So the angels that fall with him, the steam chariots, they will be the shame of his sovereign's house. As in, Yahweh will always be ashamed of the angels that rebelled against him. And I shall drive you. And obviously, Yahweh has nothing to be ashamed of, but in the sense of, I can't believe you guys did that. So, and I shall drive you from your office. Obviously, in the sense of the literal here is talking about his sovereign on earth, the king, because it was talking to Shebna, right? Shebna was the steward over the house of Yahweh. So the high priest was his sovereign. And Yahushua is our high priest. So in this case, the high priest Yahushua will be ashamed of all the angels that fell. And I shall drive you remember that Yahweh said to Yahushua, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies as your footstool. So the enemies of Yahushua are Satan and his angels. So that's why Yahushua is ashamed of them, because they claim to be with him, yet they rebel. And I shall drive you from your office. That's what happens to Lucifer. And this is interesting the way he puts it, because that's exactly how it happened with Samael, then Lucifer, and Azazel. They had an office, they had a job to do in reality, and they decided to do the opposite, actually doing what Yahweh knew they were going to do. But Yahweh is like when he put Adam and Eve in the garden. It was a paradise, and we ate and we entered this reality of pain and suffering. So Yahweh created the angel in the best reality and with the best potential, but he rebelled. So he entered that other reality that Yahweh already knew they were gonna go into, right? So I always speak about how Yahweh would manifest through Elohim, a certain type of angels. Then he would manifest through Sabaoth. That's why Yahweh Elohim and then Yahweh Sabaoth. Two administrations in the heavens, separate ones, different offices. So, and I shall drive you from your office, and you shall be ousted from your position. Revelation 12. In fact, I am making a video right now of one of my new songs in Spanish. I'm sorry. um, and I'm making this scene, the scene in which Satan falls from heaven. Actually, I'm right there right now. So, and it shall be in that day that I shall call my servant Eliakim, son of Hilkiyahu. This is wonderful, because remember, he's talking to the steward, and he, the steward, would answer to the priest, the high priest. So the steward is Lucifer in this case, who has to answer to Yahushua, and that's why he's kicked out. And then the place of Lucifer is given to Michael. Michael takes that place as the steward of this reality of the people of Israel, as we see in Daniel 12:1, that he is the one over the people of Israel, but also he will be the steward, or the earth will be given to him, just like the heavens will be given to Yahushua. So first and last, heaven and earth, first and last become one, as Ezekiel 37 says in Zechariah 14:9. So when the first and last become one, heaven and earth become one, it's all one. So the high priest takes away the place, the office of Hillel, to give it to Michael. Just like here is saying it to Shebna, taking it from him and giving it to Eliakim. Remember that Eliakim means whom my mighty one raises. Let me go here, verse 20. Eliakim and Hilkiyahu, the portion of Yahweh. So Eliakim, whom Elohim raises, or whom Elohim sets up. You see how Kim is with Kuf, with the letter Kuf. So, because there's another word with Kaf that it is related, because it means established, but this is to raise up, to get up, to stand up. And Kim, you remember that is the verb kum, from the verb kum, which is the verb used by Yosef when he saw the dreams that he saw, the prophetical dreams for which his brothers got angry with him, but were fulfilled. And there's another one that needs to be fulfilled in our time through the descendant of Joseph, which is the last. Yahushua the first is a descendant of Yahudah. The last is a descendant of Joseph. Joseph had a dream of a harvest, and the ones that he harvested, they got up, as in the verb kum. So in Judaism, it is interpreted that every time the word kum appears, it refers to the manifestation of the last, the descendant of Joseph, and the manifestation of that prophecy given to him in that dream. So Eliakim, my mighty one, raises up. So that represents the one whom Yahweh raises up in the end times through Joseph, the last, the son of Hilkiyahu, which is the portion of Yahweh. Halak, portion of Yah. So there you are. No, not that. And it shall be in that day when Satan is taken away from its place, just like Shaul was taken out and then David took that place. Hillel will be taken out and then Michael will take that place, represented here by Shebna being taken out and Eliakim taking that place. And it shall be in that day that I shall call my servant Eliakim. And remember that eventually we will read again in Isaiah how Yahweh calls the last his servant and then makes him a son. So I shall call my servant Eliakim, son of Hilkiyahu. So we could read here, and he shall be in that day, in the end times. Remember that every time that Yahweh says in that day, he refers to a certain date in history, but prophetically to the end times. That I shall call my servant him whom Elohim raises through Joseph, who is the portion of Yahweh. Remember that the the Levites didn't get a portion on the earth. Their portion was Yahweh. So they didn't get land like the rest of the tribes of Israel got land. The Levites didn't get their portion. So Asher, they got the portion of land. But the Levites didn't get a portion of land because their portion was Yahweh. So everything that the people of Israel would bring to Yahweh, it was for the Levites. So they would eat from it, and they would also, the people of Israel would give a land to Yahweh, so that land would be inhabited by the Levites, for instance. So in this case, Yahweh says that the last is his portion. That's why, as I also have said in previous studies, remember that Yahushua is called the Messiah, but the last is called his Messiah. As in one Messiah for the earth, one Messiah for the heavens. One Messiah through David, one Messiah through Joseph. Two anointed ones for heaven and earth. The Messiah, his Messiah. And I explain in my book a little bit about the numerical value of each of those words, which is interesting as well, how they have the same numerical value as, in the case of Mashiach, the same numerical value as serpent. That's why he kills the serpent. 358 minus 358, 0. But Meshicho, his Messiah, has the same numerical value as Satan, because they will see the last as Satan, because he comes as a thief in the night and because he comes as a lion. And Satan is a lion, so they will confuse him with Satan. Okay, so, and as I was saying, and it shall be in that day that I shall call my servant Eliakim, son of Hilkiyahu. I shall call my servant him whom Elohim raises from Joseph, who is the portion of Yahweh. So his Messiah, the portion of Yahweh, whom Yahweh takes for himself, and therefore also the one who gets what the world gives to Yahweh, he gets it in order to send it to him. So just like Lucifer had that job, he would get the praise of the humans in order to send it to Yahweh, but then he wanted to keep it to himself. And I shall put your robe on him. This is wonderful. This is amazing. Yahweh is good, because remember that a couple chapters ago, Yahweh told Yeshayahu, who is the prophet and therefore represents the prophet like Moshe, the last, told him, get naked. And then comes a chapter where he's afraid of his death, representing the death of the last. And now he's talking about Eliakim, but in this case, Yahweh is talking to Yeshayahu about Eliakim, but the way he says it is as if it was Yeshayahu. And I shall put your robe on him. My point is, well, I'll say it again in just a moment. I already said how Eliakim, son of Hilkiyahu, because of his name, represents the coming of the last. In this case, I should have said something different. Yeshayahu, remember I mentioned also not long ago how Yahushua, the name Yahushua, if we turn it around, Shua Yahu is similar to Yeshayahu because he has the same root of salvation. Him whom Yahweh saves. Yahushua doesn't need salvation. The last needs salvation. So I made that connection not long ago regarding the prophet as the last needs the salvation of Yahweh through Yahushua. But the name Yeshayahu can be seen as Yahushua backwards. So the prophet as the word of Yahweh prophesying about Eliakim the last becoming the steward instead of Shebna, Mikael instead of Hillel, David instead of Shaul, right? So now, just like we saw Yeshayahu getting naked, now we see how Yahweh is telling Eliakim that he will give the robes of honor that Shebna was using. He will take them from him and give them to Eliakim, just like he will take the covering of Hillel, which was amazing, and take it from him and give it to the last, like taking the crown from the king Shaul and giving it to David. So, and I shall put your robe on him and strengthen him with your girdle and give your authority into his hand, and he shall be a father. This is beautiful because remember that Yahushua came as the son, the last comes as the father. That's why Yahushua is represented by Yitzhak, the son of Abraham, who was almost sacrificed, because Yahushua was the lamb who was sacrificed for our sins, not Yitzhak. But Jacob represents the last. That's why Jacob became Israel, the father of the 12 tribes. So the last comes for the 144,000 who are of the 12 tribes. So, and I shall put your robe on him and strengthen him, which is also prophesied in Zechariah 4. Well, 4 is the two witnesses, and then 3 or 5. Let me. Verse 4 of Zechariah 3. And he answered and spoke to those who stood before him, saying, remove the filthy garments from him. And to him he said, see, I have removed your guilt from you, and I shall put costly robes on you. And I said, let them put a clean turban on his head. And they put a clean turban on his head, and they put garments on him. And the messenger of Yahweh stood by. And the messenger of Yahweh witnessed to Yahushua, saying, thus said Yahweh of hosts, if you walk in my ways, and if you guard my duty, then you shall also rule my house, and also guard my courts, and I shall give you access among these standing here. So he continues, and he's very powerful, but my point is the change of clothing that happened to Yahushua in Zechariah, the same representation as the change of clothing that Eliakim would receive. And I shall put your robe on him and strengthen him with your girdle and give your authority into his hand. The authority of Lucifer will be given to Michael, and he shall be a father when he becomes the last as the spiritual father of the 144,000. That's why also Isaiah 9, remember that Isaiah 7 reveals the coming of Mashiach through a virgin, but Isaiah 9 reveals the coming of the last, not through a virgin. And one of the things that it says is, for a child is born unto us, a son is given unto us. Since it doesn't say that it will be through a virgin, then it should be understood that it's in a normal way. And the rule is on his shoulder because he comes as a king. That's why he's telling Eliakim that he will receive the authority that Shebna had before as the steward, representing the leader of the world. And the rule is on his shoulder. And his name is called Wonder, Counselor, Strong El, Father of Eternity or Continuity, Prince of Peace. But you see, Father, he will be called Father because he is the last. Yahushua is the Son. So going back here, and he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Yahudah, meaning the chosen few. And I shall place the key of the house of David on his shoulder. What did verse here 6 of chapter 9 in Isaiah said? For a child is born unto us, a son is given unto us, and the rule is on his shoulder. Here it says, he will be a father, and I shall place the key of the house of David on his shoulder. And remember that in Philadelphia, the angel of Philadelphia, which is Michael, has the keys of David. And I shall place the key of the house of David on his shoulder. And he shall open and no one shuts, and shall shut and no one opens. So let's go to Revelation. The valley of Chizayon, the valley of the vision. And now let's go to Chizayon, as some would call it. Chapter 3, when talking to Philadelphia, the congregation of the chosen few. It says, and to the messenger of the assembly in Philadelphia, to the malach of the assembly of brotherly love. I don't know what's going on. So, and to the messenger of the assembly of Philadelphia, write, he who is set apart, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. Talking to Philadelphia, to the malach, Michael. And what did we just read in Isaiah when it seems to be talking about something completely different, yet saying the same thing, therefore is the same? And I shall place the key of the house of David on his shoulder. Eliakim? Yes, over Eliakim in that time, but over, prophetically speaking, the man whom Eliakim represents. And I shall place the key of the house of David on his shoulder, and he shall open and no one shuts, and shall shut and no one opens. Remember that Yahushua said, and I will give you the key of the kingdom. And whatever you, I forgot the word for a moment, but you tie pretty much. Oh, come on, you were. Now I'm gonna have to go look for it. Whatever you, I cannot believe it. I forgot the word. Right when I see it, I'm gonna get very mad. um, whatever you bind, yeah, you see, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you lose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Right, same thing. The key of David, who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. That key is the name of Yahushua, the name of the Messiah, and the confession of Yahushua as our sovereign. And I shall fasten him like a peg in a steadfast place. Verse 23, look at this. Bemakom, you see, in a place. Kom has the kum, same verb of Eliakim. All right. That was 23. And I shall fasten him like a peg in a steadfast place. Right? Yahweh is the one who establishes him, not by human power, human acceptance, or whatever, but by the will of Yahweh. He himself said, and I shall fasten him like a peg in a steadfast place, and he shall become a throne of steam to his father's house, as in Joseph, Jacob, Yitzhak, and Abraham, and the rest of his ancestors. But this is also key. I do not mention this in the book. I don't remember I did, but remember I do mention in the book and always in my teachings that Yahushua is the temple, and the last is the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark goes in the temple. When the witness dies and resurrects, goes up, and then Revelation 11, where the two witnesses appear, also says that the Ark was seen in the temple. Remember that the Ark of the Covenant is the throne of Yahweh on earth. So the temple and the ark were just representations of the coming of the first and coming of the last. That's why when Yahushua came to earth, the temple of the moment, the second temple, had no ark within it, only a stone, because Yahushua was just the cornerstone. Not just, he is the cornerstone that had to come for the ark to be able to be placed on it. So that's why there was no Ark of the Covenant within the most set apart place in the time of the second temple when Yahushua came. So the Ark is the throne. So just like Yahushua is the temple, he said, destroy the temple and I will raise it up in 3 days. The last is the throne. That's why Yahushua is the high priest and the last is the king. Temple, throne. High priest, high king. So, and I shall fasten him like a peg in a steadfast place, like a king. And he shall become a throne. He himself will be the throne over whom Yahweh and Yahushua will sit. Of steam, Yahushua brought the favor The last brings the steam, a throne of steam to his father's house. And they shall hang on him all the weight of his father's house. Weight is the same as steam in Hebrew. 23 and 24. 23, it says, Lekise kabod, for a throne of honor, for a throne of weight, for the house of his father. And then he says, all the kabod, all the steam over him, all the steam of the house of his father. So you see the same word in Hebrew. And they shall hang on him all the weight, they shall hang on him all the steam of his father's house. The offspring and the offshoots, all vessels of small quantity, from the cups to all the jars. This is beautiful because I also mentioned how the many are the vessels in the temple, the vessels or utensils that are used for the rituals. The temple are the, obviously, is Yahushua, like I just mentioned, but the few are the body of Mashiach because Yahushua is the cornerstone. Every other stone of the temple is one of the 144,000, which is the body. Then the blood are the vessels. Interestingly enough, blood vessels is how blood travels within the body. So the few are the temple, for they are the body of Mashiach, who is the cornerstone. The many are the vessels that were within the temple, just like body and blood. The wheat and the grapes, from which we get the wine that represents blood. So the last will be the father for the chosen few, but will be king as well for the many. So, and they shall hang on him all the weight of his father's house, the offspring and the offshoots, all vessels of small quantity, from the cups to all the jars, meaning all the many who believed in Mashiach in their hearts and then became blood. In that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, the peg that is fastened in the steadfast place shall be removed. Who is that? Hillel. He was fastened to this reality in the beginning of it. And that's why he will be taken out at the end of it. The peg that is fastened in the steadfast place shall be removed and be cut down and fall like a tree. And the burden that was on it, remember that I mentioned that they will put the weight, which is also steam. So he will be a throne of steam, and they will put all the steam on him. And then he says the burden, as in the steam that he had, the steam honor that the enemy had, that Lucifer had as the mighty one of this world, that the beauty that he had will be taken from him and given to another one. And the burden that was on it shall be cut off, for Yahweh has spoken. And remember also that he burdens the world with accusation. With the law, he accuses humans. That burden will be cut off at the very end. Most likely, burden is using a different word here. Hamasa. Masa. But remember, as in Masa Gay Chizayon. Burden. But it is translated as the message, because a message is a burden that the messenger has to carry. And depending on how hard the message is, that's how heavy it is. So a messenger carries a burden. A messenger is a malach. That's why the malach Hillel, the angel Hillel, will be losing his burden. So he will be no longer a messenger of Yahweh. He will no longer be a malach, for he will have no burden. The other one will get his burden, which will be all the weight of the honor of his father's house. So that was just to show how Masa is both burden and message, because the message is the burden that the messenger carries. And that's how we're going to end. That was an awesome chapter. Let me see what we have here. No questions here. No questions there. There. Okay. All right. Let's pray. Father Almighty Yahweh, thank you so much for allowing us to do this study and for all the revelation given. I thank you, Father, for giving me an answer, and I hope it is the answer I was waiting for, and that I understand every detail about it. Thank you so much, Father, for everything that you do in our lives, in this congregation. Continue to purify it, continue to guide it for eternity, and to guide every single person who is part of this ministry and those who pray for it and those who work for it. Please bless them, prosper them, and help them to continue doing so until eternity as well. Father, we want to ask you for um, Vidal Martinez, so that you, Father, will grant him a the help that he needs. Provide him with what he needs, Father. You know his condition, his um, tribulations, his trials, his tests, and we ask you, Father, that you please bless him, prosper him, and help him to receive the help that he needs for his current condition. Also, Father, please bless um, the three kids of, let me see, the three kids mentioned here: Israel, Sarah, Daniel, and Christian. You know them, Father. You know who they are. And I ask you, Father, that you bless them, please. Bless them and their parents, and help their parents to raise them in the best possible way according to your will. Father, bless every family that is part of this congregation, and bless every individual as well. Bless us all with your perfect will for our lives, for that is all that we want. And whatever we can add to it for our good, please do so as well. We love you with all our heart, all our mind, and all our strength. In the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, our Savior. Amen and amen. All right, Yahweh bless you all, brethren. And, the blessing, sorry. יברכך יהוה וישמרך, יאר יהוה פניו אליך ביחונך, יישא יהוה פניו אליך וישם לך shalom בשם Yahushua HaMashiach. Amen. Amen. So, yeah, Yahweh bless you all, and I will be seeing you guys next week with another study, another chapter of Isaiah. Love you all, and I'll be in touch. Blessings.